British royal household is no stranger to media storms, but nothing could prepare them for the emotional silence that swept through its halls just moments ago. As breaking headlines revealed that Prince William has cancelled all upcoming plans without explanation, royal watchers braced for impact. Then came the whisper. Princess Charlotte had received tragic news that shattered her world and his. But before we continue, please kindly subscribe. We are on a journey to reach 1,000 subscribers in less than 2 weeks, and we're counting on you. Like, comment, and hit on the notification bell. At precisely 9:07 a.m. London time, a statement from Kensington Palace stunned royal correspondents worldwide. All of Prince William's scheduled engagements for the week, including 2 high-profile diplomatic receptions, were postponed until further notice. No reason, no clarity, just silence. Within minutes, reporters began flooding social platforms, desperate for answers. Had something happened to Catherine? Was it a sudden relapse in her condition? Or had the king's health taken another turn? The absence of context sparked not just questions, but panic. Inside palace walls, it was worse. Staff were immediately instructed to power down external communications. Phones were confiscated. Advisors were pulled into hushed emergency meetings. Senior royal aides, many of whom have weathered the darkest royal storms from the Queen's passing to Harry's exile, described this moment as uniquely unsettling. One insider reportedly said, "It wasn't chaos, it was a calculated silence. That's what made it terrifying." The public had seen last-minute cancellations before illnesses, protocol changes, security threats. But this was different. There was no visible danger, no health emergency broadcast, no death announcement. And yet, William had vanished from public view. Entire royal routes were erased, convoys turned away, and interviews scrubbed from the calendar. As speculations spread like wildfire, familiar theories resurfaced. Was this connected to Catherine's long-standing recovery? Was she being rushed to hospital again? Was this a security breach, a press leak about Harry and Meghan? But none of it added up. Nothing in the public domain pointed to a trigger of such magnitude. Then came the first unconfirmed leak. It didn't come from a reporter. It came from a staff member anonymously. And what they claimed sent chills down every spine in the media. According to this source, the real reason William cancelled everything was because of Princess Charlotte. Something had happened. Something personal, something tragic. No one could explain how Charlotte was involved, but the suggestion alone was enough to shift the focus. Journalists recalibrated their lenses. Experts began tracing Charlotte's recent appearances, medical history, and school activity. Was she sick? Had something happened at school? The whisper ignited a new frenzy, one filled with far more emotion than politics. Then came the most ominous clue of all William's last known interaction before vanishing. An aide reported seeing him hold his phone to his ear, drop it to the table, then whisper, "I need to get to her now." He left everything behind, his car, his staff, his briefcase. He ran. That's when royal insiders knew this wasn't about the crown. This was about a father. But as whispers grew louder, the full weight of Charlotte's tragedy began to reveal itself, and it would force William to make a heart-wrenching choice no father should ever have to face. She thought it was just another routine day, but behind her composed royal smile, Princess Charlotte was unknowingly carrying a secret sealed in an envelope addressed only to her. When she opened it, something inside her broke. What she read was never meant for the public, but it changed her future and shook her father to his core. The envelope arrived without ceremony, no grand royal insignia, no prior warning, just a soft cream-colored parcel tucked quietly among Charlotte's school materials. Delivered by private royal courier and bypassing every expected checkpoint. Palace protocol was unusually silent. Not even her personal assistant or nanny was alerted in advance. It was addressed solely to her, the handwriting unfamiliar, the timing precise. Inside the envelope was a letter not typed, not formal, but handwritten with trembling urgency. The author was someone Charlotte had heard of in whispers, but never truly known. A distant royal relative, a woman long removed from the palace's inner circles, exiled not by scandal, but by silence. The opening line said it all. "You have the right to know what I was never allowed to say." The tone of the letter wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional, it was something worse, calm, reflective, and unflinchingly honest. The kind of truth that sits heavy on a child's chest, no matter how noble their bloodline. It spoke of hidden truths, genetic consequences, and a pattern that's been ignored for generations. It warned of a hereditary condition, unnamed but devastating, allegedly carried down Diana's side of the family and traced through careful observation in Charlotte's subtle medical history. Until then, Charlotte had seen herself like any child of her age, a little mischievous, a bit too sensitive, prone to dizzy spells and lightheadedness, but nothing extraordinary. But the letter implied that these weren't coincidences. They were symptoms, and that those symptoms would only intensify with age. She didn't cry immediately, she didn't scream. Those who saw her later said her face turned pale, her posture collapsed, and her footsteps wavered as she walked out of the private reading room. One aide described her eyes as blank, like something had been erased from her. Charlotte excused herself without a word, and then minutes later, she was gone from view. A message was dispatched to William. It said simply, "You need to come now." "She's not okay." Without hesitation, William dropped what he was doing, ignoring security arrangements and ditching all protocol. Witnesses said he ran through the private corridors barefoot, shouting her name before reaching her room. The door was shut. His knock was soft at first, then frantic. When it finally opened, the look on his face said more than any press release ever could. What had been revealed in that letter was more than information. It was a warning, a burden, a timeline, one that carried implications not only for Charlotte's personal future, but for the very lineage of the monarchy. What Charlotte discovered wasn't just shocking. It raised urgent questions about royal bloodlines, family history, and what her future could look like. The House of Windsor has always guarded its medical lineage like a crown jewel, but Diana's legacy may have held more than just emotional weight. It may have carried a secret condition that skipped generations until now, and Charlotte might be its next tragic chapter. It didn't take long after the letter surfaced for whispers to reach the highest levels of the palace's medical advisory team. The contents of that letter, though officially unacknowledged, reportedly pointed to a rare genetic disorder, one that hadn't been diagnosed, but whose markers had been silently tracked within the family tree, and not just any branch Diana's. Behind the glamour and grace of the late Princess of Wales was a history peppered with unexplained medical concerns, fainting spells, sensory overload, sudden fatigue. At the time, they were chalked up to stress, eating disorders, emotional pressure. But palace insiders now believe those signs were fragments of something deeper, something inherited, something overlooked. Diana's own father, John Spencer, was known to suffer from periodic collapses and chronic nerve sensitivity. Though no official diagnosis was ever confirmed, medical records from that era were thin, and most of what existed was sealed under private orders. But there were patterns, and William, perhaps unconsciously, had seen echoes of them in Charlotte. When Charlotte was still a toddler, William reportedly raised quiet concerns during her routine health checkups, her occasional dizziness, her sensitivity to bright lights. Moments of sudden disorientation. He was told it was nothing, growing pains. One aide recalled the physician saying, but as she grew older, those moments didn't disappear. They became more pronounced. And now, years later, a letter had drawn a direct line back to Diana. The contents of that letter weren't just emotional. They were clinical, speculative, but informed. The relative who penned it was said to have consulted medical literature, family anecdotes, and even private notes from Diana's biographers, connecting dots that the palace had spent decades avoiding. It wasn't proof, but it was close enough to ignite a firestorm. Within 24 hours, royal physicians began assembling, confidential tests were ordered, specialists were flown in under assumed names. The operation was done in silence. No leaks, no schedules, but sources within the palace medical wing confirmed that the urgency was unmistakable. What they were searching for was rare, inherited, often dormant until adolescence, and in some cases debilitating. What shook William most wasn't the science, it was the memory. He had seen his mother struggle in silence. He had lived with the chaos that came when answers never arrived. Now, with his own daughter in the spotlight, the nightmare was repeating. He was overheard telling an aide, "It feels like losing my mother all over again, except this time I can't let it happen." It wasn't just fear of illness. It was fear of history, of a cycle reawakening, of the sins of secrecy now threatening another generation. But as doctors worked behind closed doors, a parallel storm was already brewing, one that threatened to turn public opinion against the palace itself. Behind every headline is a mother grieving in silence. As the world speculated, Catherine, still recovering and out of public life, received the news about Charlotte alone. What she did next shocked even her closest aides and signaled that this wasn't just a family emergency. It was a battle for her daughter's dignity. The message came to her in the quiet hours of the morning. William had not yet returned. The palace was unusually still. A single envelope was delivered to her bedside, carried not by a doctor or royal official, but by a trusted aide, shaking, eyes lowered. Catherine didn't need to ask what it was about. She simply nodded, took the letter, and asked to be left alone. Moments later, the door to her private recovery suite was locked from the inside. What followed was silence. No movement, no requests, until a sharp, decisive order rang out from behind the door. "Remove every media device from this room." No phones, no news, no noise. Even the television screen was unplugged. Catherine didn't want updates. She didn't want analysis. She didn't want the world's opinion on what her daughter was now facing. She wanted clarity, and above all, she wanted control. Aides outside the room described muffled sobs, then a loud crash, something thrown. Others said she repeated the same phrase over and over, almost like a prayer. "She's just a child. This isn't her burden to carry." Catherine had weathered storms before: public pressure, invasive tabloids, relentless scrutiny. But this was different. This was her daughter, and this time the pain wasn't political. It was maternal. Her instincts took over. Within minutes, she issued a directive that bypassed traditional royal protocol. Charlotte was to be pulled from all upcoming appearances, public, private, ceremonial. There would be no more photographs, no smiling in uniforms, no scheduled events. The palace's image machine would stop spinning. Her daughter wasn't a figurehead. She was a girl in pain, but Catherine didn't stop there. For the first time since her own health battle began, staff witnessed an emotional collapse. She wept openly, uncontrollably. One staff member later confessed it was the first time she let herself break, not for herself, but for her daughter. And as her tears slowed, resolve hardened in their place. She picked up her personal secure line and placed a direct call to William. Her message was simple, final: we need to stop everything, not pause, not regroup, stop. William, still sitting beside Charlotte at the time, didn't ask for clarification. He didn't hesitate. He hung up the phone and began erasing his schedule, and William did just that. But cancelling his schedule was only the beginning. What followed sent shock waves through the monarchy. In a moment of defiance, Prince William made a decision that split the monarchy behind closed doors. Against firm advice from royal courtiers, he cancelled key diplomatic meetings, postponed royal tour, and cleared his calendar indefinitely. But the bigger shock, his chilling words to his staff. "If she goes down, so does everything I stand for." In the days following Charlotte's revelation, William was expected to carry on. The palace had carefully mapped out a series of high-stakes diplomatic engagements, meetings with foreign dignitaries, charity appearances tied to global press, and a much-anticipated environmental summit where William was set to headline. Everything had been choreographed to reinforce stability, to remind the world that the monarchy, though shaken, remained intact. But William had other plans. When advisors met him to review the final itinerary, they were met with a stone wall. He didn't just request postponements, he demanded them. One by one, he crossed out each event from the schedule, refusing to make a single appearance until Charlotte's situation was understood, addressed, and emotionally stabilized. Curtis was stunned. They pleaded, argued, even threatened reputational damage, but William didn't flinch. He told them plainly, "You want optics? Here's one, your future king abandoning his daughter while she suffers. Run that in your press briefings." Behind palace doors, panic began to swell. Aides scrambled to put together alternative appearances. Suggestions poured in. Perhaps Catherine could release a written statement. Perhaps George could appear briefly with his grandfather. Or perhaps Charlotte's situation could be downplayed with a vague, health-related update. William rejected it all. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Senior officials warned of serious diplomatic fallout. Phone calls from international partners poured in. Confused by the sudden cancellations, government liaison raised concerns over broken commitments. But William held the line, reportedly warning those closest to him. "If anyone tries to use my daughter's pain for damage control, I will walk away. I will resign from every title if I have to." Inside the family, the divide grew deeper. Some believed William was jeopardizing the institution's image for personal emotion. Others, especially those closer to Catherine, defended his stance as overdue and necessary. But William didn't seek consensus. He wasn't asking for permission. He put pen to paper and wrote a direct note to his father. In it, he didn't mince words. "I am not just a prince. I am a father first. If Charlotte is fighting, then I fight with her. Everything else can wait." And with that, the lines were drawn. No more interviews, no more tour, no more curated appearances to maintain illusion. William had shattered protocol, and in doing so redefined what it meant to lead with love instead of legacy. But while William wrestled with duty and fatherhood, an even deeper layer of tragedy was about to unfold, one tied to Charlotte's dreams. Now on the brink of collapse, she had dreams that stretched beyond the palace gates: dance recital, science fairs, the Olympics. Charlotte's childhood was vibrant with ambition. But in one swift blow, those dreams were shaken. Her condition wasn't just medical, it was limiting, and it meant saying goodbye to the life she imagined. For months, Charlotte had been rehearsing for a royal ballet showcase. It was to be her proudest moment. Yet a performance she'd committed to with the fierce determination of someone far older than her years. She had trained in secret, surprising even her instructors with her discipline and grace. Every night she practiced late into the evening, sometimes with Catherine watching quietly from the doorway. It wasn't about attention, it was about passion. This was her world, her joy, her voice. But now that stage would remain empty. Doctors, after running several rounds of tests behind closed doors, delivered the verdict. Charlotte would need rest, serious, extended, and uncompromising. Overexertion could cause long-term damage. Her condition, they warned, required strict regulation, no recital, no strenuous activity, and certainly no pressure to meet the impossible expectations of royal life. Not for now, not for a year, possibly longer. The decision came down like a hammer. Charlotte's extracurriculars were stripped away. Her elite academic curriculum was placed on pause. Her royal training modules were halted without discussion. A carefully crafted future was suddenly wiped clean. And for the first time in her young life, Charlotte began to understand the gravity of what it meant to carry a legacy and lose control of it. But it wasn't the absence of activities that hurt the most. It was the question she finally asked late one night, barely a whisper. "Does this mean I can't be queen one day?" William, already stretched between duty and heartbreak, took her hand and answered slowly with tears in his eyes, "You'll always be more than a title." Aides standing outside the room later admitted it was the first time they wept in the course of this crisis, because in that moment, Charlotte wasn't a royal. She was just a girl watching her world shrink, grasping for reassurance in a sea of uncertainty. Days later, without fanfare, Charlotte was seen giving away her beloved point shoes to a younger cousin. No announcement, no ceremony, just a quiet moment of surrender, a gesture that spoke louder than any statement. For her, it wasn't simply about quitting. It was about letting go of a dream she believed in with all her heart. But the echoes of her grief didn't stop with her. But Charlotte's pain was not just physical. It began to manifest across the family, testing loyalties, trust, and the very image of royal strength. As the young princess suffered, there was one royal silence louder than any headline. King Charles and Queen Camilla remained disturbingly quiet. No visit, no call, no statement. And behind the silence, a chilling reason that exposed deep cracks in the royal family's unity. William, amidst the chaos, still held on to one quiet expectation that his father would come. Not as the king, not as the crown, but as a grandfather. He believed that at the very least, Charles would pick up the phone. He waited through the night. No call came. By morning, aides whispered the truth. There were no plans for a visit, no messages drafted, not even a private note sent through the palace's secure channels. There was nothing, just silence. Camilla, meanwhile, was seen laughing with guests at a luxury charity luncheon only hours after the news of Charlotte's withdrawal from public life had begun to ripple through the press. Dressed immaculately, smiling for cameras, she made no reference to Charlotte. When later asked by an attendee whether she had reached out to the family, Camilla reportedly shrugged and said, "Children get sick." "That's life." That remark, leaked by someone in attendance, detonated like a bomb across social media. The public backlash was immediate and venomous. Commentators called it cold, heartless. Some accused her of treating Charlotte like collateral damage in the firm's larger machinery, but inside the palace, the tension was even worse. William was livid. He had hoped for support, not as a prince, but as a son. He had asked for discretion, for unity, for the monarchy to close ranks around his daughter in this moment of unimaginable vulnerability. Instead, Charles was reportedly preoccupied, fixated on pending constitutional reviews and a legislative summit in Edinburgh. When briefed on the situation, he allegedly replied, "William has it under control. Let's stay focused on the schedule." William, according to insiders, said to a close aide, "If this were George, they'd be here in a heartbeat." The words weren't just a complaint. They were an indictment of favoritism, of indifference, of a hierarchy that placed duty above family time and time again. Catherine, already emotionally raw, went further. She reportedly barred Camilla from coming anywhere near Charlotte, privately telling staff, "We are not turning this into a photo opportunity." The divide grew. Courtiers tried to mediate, urging Charles to make a gesture, any gesture that could repair the optics. He declined. Whether it was pride, protocol, or detachment, no one could say for sure. But what was clear to all was that the silence from the throne wasn't just a misstep. It was a message, one that left William more isolated than ever. That moment of silence from the throne would set off an avalanche and lead to the next shocking turn. Charlotte herself making a decision that stunned even her parents. She's only a child, but her words echoed across the nation. In a move that no one expected, Princess Charlotte asked her parents to release a handwritten letter to the public. What it contained was part confession, part goodbye, and part hope that one day the truth wouldn't hurt so much. The decision wasn't made by advisors. It wasn't part of any palace strategy or PR campaign. It came from Charlotte herself, deliberate, quiet, and unwavering. Days after the media storm intensified, and just as headlines began to speculate on her silence, she sat down with a blank sheet of paper and wrote the letter in her own words. She didn't ask for approval, she asked to be heard. The letter was addressed to all the girls like me, 6 words that shattered every wall between royalty and reality. From the very first line, the message was clear. This wasn't about thrones, titles, or pageantry. It was about identity, about struggle, and about what it meant to feel small in a world that expected you to be perfect. In the letter, Charlotte didn't shy away from her pain. She wrote about the fear of not being strong enough, the loneliness of not knowing what comes next, and the disappointment of watching her dreams dissolve in silence. But beneath that heartbreak was something else, resilience. She wrote about how strength isn't just about showing up, but knowing when to step back, how bravery sometimes means saying no. One line from the letter leaked within hours. Even princesses have to pause sometimes. Those words lit up the internet, not as a royal soundbite, but as a universal truth. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Letters poured in from children and parents alike, thousands, thanking Charlotte for her courage, for her honesty, and for reminding them that stepping away doesn't mean giving up. Mental health advocates rallied behind her. Organizations across the world praised the palace for allowing her voice to stand unfiltered. For once, a royal child wasn't being shielded or repackaged. She was being seen as she was, vulnerable yet powerful, scared yet strong. The letter closed with just a single sentence, one promise, one line that struck deep into the hearts of millions. "I'll be back when I'm stronger, promise." It was both a farewell and a vow. And in those few words, Charlotte gave the nation something it hadn't felt in weeks' hope. But inside the palace, the ripple of that letter went far deeper. It wasn't just the public that was moved, it was the institution itself. Advisors who once dismissed Charlotte's condition as a private matter suddenly found themselves confronted by her public truth. And for the first time in decades, the monarchy was forced to face a question it had long ignored. But as the public embraced Charlotte's truth, the monarchy was left with a sobering realization. What would the future look like without her at the center? In the halls of royal power, nothing remains untouched after a moment like this. With Charlotte's future uncertain, succession plans may never look the same. And for William, the pain of today is shaping a very different tomorrow. One where love, not legacy, may be the crown he ultimately chooses. Whispers had already begun to circulate before Charlotte's letter went public, but afterward they turned into waves. Rumors that Prince William was no longer just postponing duties. He was re-evaluating the very structure of the monarchy's future. For centuries, the line of succession has been etched in stone, unwavering and absolute. But behind palace doors, William began asking questions no heir had dared speak aloud. What if they don't want it? What if they deserve a choice? Sources close to the palace confirmed that William held several discreet meetings with reform-minded advisors in the days following Charlotte's announcement. While the conversations were labeled hypothetical, the tone was unmistakably serious. He raised concerns about the pressures placed on royal children, about inherited roles that left no room for healing or individuality. He asked what it would take to redesign the monarchy, one that adapted to the emotional needs of its future, not just its traditions, and all eyes turned to George. At just 13, the young prince was suddenly pulled into longer briefings, deeper ceremonial training, and more high-level visibility. He began sitting in on engagements his father once shielded him from. One advisor called it a necessary pivot, another called it premature, but what no one could deny was that the shift was happening, and it was happening fast. Meanwhile, Catherine's influence quietly intensified. Known for her quiet strength and calculated restraint, she began supporting a new narrative, a modern monarchy, one rooted in mental wellness, consent, and flexibility. She privately spoke to staff about empowering the next generation to be more than what history expects of them. It was a subtle rebellion, but a powerful one. For William, everything had changed. Not just because of the pressure, but because of Charlotte. Watching her rise, fall, and find her voice had opened something in him, a clarity he hadn't felt before. He no longer saw the crown as destiny. He saw it as a responsibility, and perhaps more importantly, as a choice. In a moment of rare emotional vulnerability, William reportedly told a trusted confidant, "Charlotte made me realize what truly matters. Not how the world sees us, but how we protect each other when the world isn't watching." That realization was more than a reflection, it was a recalibration. And though no formal announcement has been made, the ripples are unmistakable. The monarchy may look the same on the outside, but inside the structure is shifting. The crown may shine, but behind its gold is a father, a daughter, and a family forever changed. Thanks for watching, and kindly subscribe our channel for more updates.